Everybody in that room had their name written up on the board, okay? And what the coaches did was next to each name, they went through those pieces of paper and they would put lines next to each name based on how many times that individual was chosen to be in somebody's foxhole. So this was very telling, and you're kind of sitting there and thinking to yourself, man, how many times did I get chosen? Welcome to the Shaw Strength Podcast. I am your host, Brian Shaw, and today I've got a short but very powerful message to share with all of you. One thing that I would say before we jump into it here is if you guys enjoy this, if you get something out of it, if it helps you out, please share the podcast. We're trying to get this thing going, and my goal with this is to try to reach as many people as we possibly can and to spread great messages, to spread positive messages, and to hopefully help people out through the process. It's really what I want to try to do. So any help that you guys can give is very much appreciated on that front. So today, what I'm going to talk about is a story from when I played basketball in college. My coach was a very military-minded coach, and I, at the time, have to admit, I kind of hated it at certain points, but I also very much came to appreciate it as we went through the process. During the preseason, a lot of guys would walk onto the team. So you had the guys that were on scholarship, and then you had the guys that were trying to make the team that were walking on. And in preseason, we did a ton of preseason conditioning. Now, this is conditioning that was very hard. It took all of us to a breaking point, and you got to see who was going to quit and who was going to step up when it got really, really difficult and never quit, never stop, and go through that pain, that difficulty, and overcome any obstacle that was in their way. One day we walked into the locker room, and the coaches were in the front of the locker room, and basically they laid out a mission for all of us, and that mission was to pick 4 other individuals that were going to be in our foxhole. So when you think of a foxhole, if anybody's not familiar with that, what it is it's essentially a hole that troops would use if they were under attack to protect themselves from gunfire or attackers. And whoever's in your foxhole is very important. These individuals are individuals that you literally could trust with your life to have your back in any situation that were to come about. So we're playing basketball, but I remember this meeting and the way that the coaches approached this and talked to us about it was like we were going to war. So it was not something that we took lightly at all. We wrote down names, and then you had to think about who's going to be in my foxhole with me? Who am I going to count on that's in this room? So the other men that are in this room with me, I need to pick 4 names because in a game of basketball, when you walk on the court, you have 5 total. So you would essentially pick 4 other individuals that are going to be in this foxhole. And at that point, we had already gone through several challenges as a team, individually, and you were able to see through this hard conditioning who was going to quit and who was going to step up. So, there were guys that you obviously got along with, that you could joke around with, that you could smile and laugh with. But sometimes those guys would get a little bit soft as you were going through this conditioning. And so I remember myself taking a very hard look at who those individuals were going to be. Who was I going to put down on that piece of paper and submit it? And I put a lot of thought into it, right? And I remember thinking back, and I was like, I feel as though the guys that are really stepping up during the conditioning and, helping other teammates along, if somebody's struggling, they're yelling at them and saying, hey, come on, let's get one more. Let's do the extra rep. Let's finish this. And having that type of attitude, I said to myself, those are the guys that I want to have in my foxhole. So those were the names that I wrote down. And everybody on the team wrote down their 4 names. Now, this is where it got interesting. After everybody had completed that and written down their names and submitted it, everybody in that room had their name written up on the board, okay? And what the coaches did was, next to each name, they went through those pieces of paper and they would put lines next to each name based on how many times that individual was chosen to be in somebody's foxhole. So this was very telling. And, you're kind of sitting there and thinking to yourself, man, how many times did I get chosen, right? How many individuals in this room would count on me in a life or death situation and choose me to be in their foxhole to have their back? And, before the marks started going up there, I think all of us in that room were a little bit tense because it was a sense of, I want my name to be chosen. I'm going to be proud of this. And I remember there was a lot of people that put me in their foxhole, and I was very, very proud of that. And it almost inspired me to work even harder so that those individuals on that team who were my teammates could count on me in any situation to do what needed to be done, to have their back as we were going into games, as we were going into practices, and as we were trying to win. And that made me feel really good. Now, what I will say is there was a lot of names, from guys in that locker room that did not get chosen at all, or that maybe got chosen, once or twice. And that was also very telling as well. And I would, venture to guess that those guys that didn't get chosen very often hopefully took that to heart and in a lot of ways were able to step up. And I would envision that our coach was trying to send that message to us as a unit, as a team, saying, look, you want to be one of those individuals that's chosen by your teammates to be in their foxhole. And I remember that really, obviously I remember it to this day, and I'm sharing it with all of you because it had a lot of power, but we're going to expand it from there just a little bit more. So in life, this is obviously basketball. We were playing basketball, and I think it was a very, very important message and lesson that, the coaches there shared with all of us. And I think it made us stronger as a team because there was a sense of pride with that. But if we transfer this message over to life, I think we have all heard at some point that you want to surround yourself with people that make you better, that inspire you, that encourage you, that believe in your goals and where you're trying to go in your life. And if you're surrounded by great individuals like that, you'll always level up. You'll always get better. Now, if you surround yourself with individuals that bring you down, that don't believe in you, that are always trying to make you make negative decisions that are going to take you backwards, typically you will not move forward. You will not get better. So what I want you to think about is if you had to pick a foxhole in your life, and these are individuals that would surround you, and we take it to that level of literally life and death. If you were in a life or death situation, someone was coming to attack you, to kill you, who could you count on in that situation to have your back and know 100% that they would not back down, they would not waver in their support of you, and they would back you up and have your back and keep you alive? And I think that there's a lot of power in that because, you can surround yourself with great individuals, but if your group is too large, inevitably you're going to have somebody in that group that's not going to have your back. And when the rubber meets the road and things get difficult, they're going to not be found. They're going to be nowhere to be found, and they're not going to have your back, and they're not going to back you up. So number one is thinking about who would be in your foxhole and who you could possibly choose and count on in a life or death situation. Next, we're going to flip it the other way and look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and say to yourself, are you a person that you feel like your colleagues, your friends, your teammates, whoever would choose to have in their foxhole? Are you always stepping up in your life? When you're faced with a challenge or something difficult, do you step up to the plate and get it done? Or are you the person that's nowhere to be found and that lets other people down and is not reliable, not trustworthy? and essentially is someone that no one would choose to have in their foxhole. Because essentially, in my mind, if you are an individual that lives your life in that way and meets challenges head on and is trustworthy and reliable, and if you shake somebody's hand and you give them your word that you're going to do something, that gets done. Is that you or is that not you? I think there's a lot of power in looking in the mirror at times. And, I think a lot of people out there would say, well, I would pick these individuals to be in my foxhole and they're going to make me better. But what if you are the weak link in that unit? If you're the weak link in that chain, that's where it's going to break, right? So you want to be an individual that everybody wants to choose to be in their foxhole, that you are a person that can be counted on and that you will step up to the plate in any situation. And I really think that this applies to life. It applies to your job. It applies to if you're part of a team, and it applies to also if you're in a relationship. If you're in a relationship, if you're in a marriage, you would always want your significant other, your wife, your husband, to choose you, to have their back in any situation. And that's a bond very much that's unbreakable. And I would say, going all the way back to when I was in college, that was a bond that was formed between myself and my teammates there. And it's very, very strong. I mean, some of those guys I have not spoken to quite literally in years, but I know that if I really needed them because of what we went through back then, I could call upon them. I could say, hey, I need some help. I need you to have my back. And I promise you that those guys that went through it and that were chosen back then would still be chosen now, because it's a quality that does not go away. It's not something that is lost. So I think that's the end message today. It's something that I would hope that a lot of you can carry over to your life and think about your foxhole, but also think about, would you be in someone else's foxhole? And are you living in a way where people would choose you and want to have you to be the person to have their back in a tough and difficult situation, and in a situation that's as extreme as life or death? Something powerful to think about. I really appreciate all of you and your support of the podcast. We're going to keep some more great content coming your way. Like I said at the beginning, please share this if you got anything out of it, if it helped you out or inspired you to think a little bit and improve your life. I think we're going to sign off there. Remember to go out and be great.